Hey everybody, Aaron Rift here from NoDQ.com. This is a very special video I am doing today. This is a 100 Q&A session that I am doing. I have been running NoDQ.com now since 1998, but this is the first time I'm ever putting myself up to a challenge like this. I've done Q&As before, but never 100 questions in one session. If you enjoyed this video, please do me a favor and tell a friend, spread the word, click on that subscribe button, and turn on the notification bell to get updates. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Question number 1 from Joseph Cullen. Favorite wrestler of all time? For years, it was always Steve Austin or Hulk Hogan. I grew up a Hulkamaniac, and Hulk Hogan was my sentimental favorite. But I think overall, not just looking at it from a fan's perspective, but also a business perspective, I have to go with Steve Austin as my all-time favorite as far as replay value goes, looking back at his old matches and his body of work. Steve Austin would have to be my number 1 choice, followed by Hulk Hogan, and Shawn Michaels would be right up there as well. Question number 2 from Mr. Tito. Tito says, what is the best wrestling video game of all time? I would have to say No Mercy on the Nintendo 64. That game was so much fun. I loved the game engine. I loved the gameplay. It was pretty much the perfect wrestling game. I loved being able to edit the characters, change their looks, the backstage areas. The game felt like an authentic wrestling match when you were playing it. Another game that would be right up there would be the Wrestlemania 19 game on the GameCube for Nintendo. I really enjoyed the matches that you could do outside of the ring, fighting in the harbor and the parking lot. And that game ultimately led to the start of the Fantasy League No DQ CAW. And WrestleMania 19 was such a fun game that I felt motivated to get that league going. And then also, Day of Reckoning would be my 3rd place. Day of Reckoning, of course, on the Nintendo GameCube. Question number 3 comes from Christopher Willis. What is your favorite WWE 30-man Royal Rumble match of all time? Has to be the 1992 Royal Rumble. Ric Flair coming out there at number 3 and managing to survive the entire time. Bobby Heenan on the verge of having a heart attack every time Flair was about to be eliminated. Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby Heenan, the commentary on that match really helped it out. And of course, Ric Flair lasting the entire time. You had a star-studded Royal Rumble. Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, Undertaker, Sid Vicious, Jake Roberts, the list goes on. That was one of my all-time favorite matches in WWE history, and to this day, it's still my favorite Royal Rumble match. Question number 4 comes from Miguel Ortiz. What's an interesting piece of wrestling news or rumor that you think people have forgotten about? I remember reading that Justin Bieber was going to host a WWE event back in 2011. The one that sticks out the most to me was Eminem. I'm not sure if a lot of people know about this, but Eminem was reportedly going to work with WWE, and plans ended up falling through with that. Eminem on WWE television, I think, would have been very interesting, but for whatever reason, things did not pan out. I think that would have been a pretty big story. He would have been one of the bigger celebrities to appear on a WWE broadcast, but it never came to be. Question number 5 from Hardcore Casual Fan. Do you think in the last few years, WWE and the wrestling industry have found someone that appeals to hardcore and casuals equally? Is there ever going to be a next Steve Austin or The Rock level superstar in the business again? CM Punk and John Cena were close, but no Rock and Austin. Anyone on the horizon? Unfortunately, I feel like it's a long shot. It's what wrestling needs. Wrestling needs that next larger-than-life superstar, somebody who is arguably bigger than the company. But I do not think Vince McMahon is ever going to allow that to happen. I think that he does not want a repeat of what happened with Hulk Hogan. Hogan got so big, and then Hogan went to WCW, and WCW for a while became the #1 brand. I think WWE and Vince specifically wants as much power and control as possible, and you can only get so big as far as the machine is concerned. You cannot get bigger than the machine. But yeah, I think wrestling could really benefit from that major league superstar, but I'm not sure WWE will ever allow that to happen. Question number 6 from Justin Hayes. Are you overall satisfied with the state of wrestling that it's in right now? I am somewhat satisfied because AEW is putting on a really solid show. NXT has been very solid as well. Raw and SmackDown, not so much. WWE main roster pay-per-views have been a mixed bag. There's a lot of good stuff, but there's also a lot of stuff that isn't so good. For me, because it's my job to cover wrestling, it can be unsatisfying at times when there's just so much content to watch and a lot of it is filler. It can be tough at times, but I think for your average fan out there, I think it is satisfying because you have so many options and there's lots of good quality stuff out there. Question number 7 from David Diaz, former Wrestling Trivia Challenge champion. What would you say has been the downside to social media and what it has brought to wrestling fans? I think the downside is just the overall negativity. I think in this era, fans feel like they have to complain about every single thing, and the negativity just becomes overwhelming. You don't see enough compliments about the good stuff. To me, that's the biggest negative of social media, is that it gives people the opportunity to say whatever they want behind a computer, and it just gets out of control. It really does. And question number 8 from David, on the flip side to question number 7, what would be the upside to social media and what it has brought to wrestling fans? I think the upside is that it has created a more interactive environment. Wrestlers are tweeting regularly and they respond to fans. Fans now have a closer connection to wrestlers than they ever have. Now, some might see that as a negative because it takes away the kayfabe. Now people just talk about their daily lives. Wrestlers go on social media and post about their personal lives, and you kind of lose that mystique about wrestlers with social media. You can really look at it from a positive standpoint and also a negative one, but I think it is a positive that fans get to interact with the superstars. Question number 9 from Hans Ali. In your opinion, who is the greatest wrestler to never become world champion? I would have to say Roddy Piper. Piper did hold the United States Championship and the Intercontinental title, but he was never the world champion. He came close. He beat Hulk Hogan at Starrcade, but he never won the big one. I'd have to say Piper. Piper would be at the top of my list. And question number 10 from John Lane on a similar subject here. Who is the greatest superstar to perform in WWE and never hold a singles title? I would have to say Sting. Sting came into WWE, but he never won a championship. He only had a few matches in WWE, and then unfortunately, he had that career-ending injury in that match against Seth Rollins. It would have been cool to have seen Sting pick up a WWE championship or even be a tag team champion, but unfortunately, just didn't pan out. And another one that people might not think about is Barry Windham. Barry Windham was one half of the tag team champions in WWE, but he never got a run with the IC title or anything like that. And Barry Windham was a great performer in WWE and the NWA, of course. So it always made me upset that Barry Windham never got a really solid run in WWE and got to hold a singles title. Question number 11 from Jerry Slaughter. He says a match or series of that he misses greatly is the Lethal Lottery. And do I think that it would translate well today with the split brands, or would it be best to combine the two or possibly four for the tournament? I think the idea behind the Lethal Lottery that made it work was the fact that the odd couple teams would be forced to work together. Now, if you combined the brands, you would still have the possibility of two people from the same brand being paired together. And I guess that's what worked too about it, that sometimes you would have the luck of the draw and you would be paired up with somebody that you get along with. I don't think it really matters which brand you do. I don't see this match happening on the main roster, but I'd love to see NXT implement the Lethal Lottery and maybe have NXT and NXT UK all participate in it. That would be a lot of fun. Question number 12 from Kit Young. What does the future hold for NXT? And he talks about how NXT has proved it's just as equal as the main roster. How will Triple H evolve the brand, he asks. And will there be new surprises, perhaps like CM Punk returning? I am hopeful that NXT will be able to expand the brand to the point where NXT can be in a different city every week, perform in bigger arenas on a weekly basis, just like what AEW Dynamite is doing. I think that that should be NXT's top goal right now. And hopefully NXT can continue to be consistent and put out a really solid product. But what needs to be done to draw those larger crowds? That's the question. And will Triple H take more chances with NXT, or will he rely on the formula? That I don't know. That we'll have to wait and see what happens. Question number 13 from CC Drink. What was your favorite WrestleMania moment? To me, it was WrestleMania 13, Steve Austin versus Bret Hart. Bret Hart putting on the sharpshooter, Steve Austin covered in blood, refusing to give up. And that was the beginning of Steve Austin's rise to the top and really the birth of the Attitude Era. Has to be that as my all-time favorite Mania moment. Question number 14 from Christopher Mace. What do you believe the NWA needs to do differently in 2020 to break out from the pack with all the other wrestling promotions? I think the NWA is already doing something different. They are a throwback to the old school NWA from the 1980s, and they have presented a different kind of show. Now, what can they do to draw in new fans? That I'm not sure. Maybe try more of a hybrid of old school NWA with something completely new that hasn't been done before. I think that that would be a nice idea, but I don't know if they're going to take any chances. I think that they know their audience and they want to present that product as it is. But if NWA really wants to step it up and grow as a brand, I think at some point they're going to need to do something entirely different and reinvent the wrestling business. And that really goes for any promotion. If you want to take it to the next level and be different from your competitors, you got to think outside the box and you got to try something new. Question number 15 from Kayfabe Candy Ass. He says, since nostalgia runs dominated the 2010s, creating no true stars and viewership in the toilet, especially with young viewers, do you see big changes in a youth movement coming this decade, or will WWE turn to whatever qualifies for a reality era / 2000s era star? Note Edge rumors already. I am hopeful that over the next couple of years, WWE will start to develop some new stars. I think that they need to stop relying on the older talent, and you need to make those new stars. But going back to earlier, will Vince McMahon allow somebody to grab that brass ring? Vince always says you got to grab the brass ring, but will Vince allow it to happen so somebody out there can become a true larger-than-life superstar? I'll believe it when I see it, but I am hopeful that within the next 5 years or so, we will have that next Steve Austin or Rock type superstar. Question number 16 from No DQ Virtue. Why do you always revert to Vince Russo in WCW 2000 when an angle like the Lana, Liv, Bobby Lashley, and Rusev wedding takes place? It all comes down to the swerve. Liv Morgan coming out during the Bobby Lashley and Lana wedding segment was something none of us saw coming. It was very much like a soap opera type of segment, which is what Vince Russo would do, and Vince Russo would also book the swerves and throw the curveballs at you. That's what I got out of that wedding segment. It very much reminded me of a Vince Russo style segment from the Attitude Era, or even, as you put it, WCW 2000. Question number 17 from Gregory Cherry, Wrestling Trivia Champion. Will Owen Hart be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame this decade? Since I have a decade to be right or wrong on this answer, I will go ahead and say yes. And if I'm wrong, a decade from now, nobody's going to remember this video and what I said. But I will go ahead and throw out a prediction. Owen Hart will go into the WWE Hall of Fame. Either Martha will finally agree to it, or her children will agree to it. One way or another, Owen will go into the Hall of Fame. Question number 18 from the Brooklyn Baker. Do you think WrestleMania is too early to beat The Fiend, presuming Reigns wins the Rumble? I think it is too early. Bray Wyatt should not be losing at WrestleMania. I would keep Bray Wyatt undefeated for the rest of the year. I would have him retire The Undertaker at Survivor Series this year, 30-year anniversary of Undertaker's debut. So I do agree on that. Roman Reigns, nobody for that matter, should be beating Bray Wyatt at WrestleMania. Question number 19 from Kofi6195. When do you think is the right time for The Fiend to finally lose? I personally think the earliest is SummerSlam 2020. Like I said, I think Bray Wyatt, The Fiend, should stay undefeated through Survivor Series. He should beat The Undertaker in The Undertaker's final match. And then WrestleMania 2021, I think that would be the proper time. And start planning for it now. Start building up somebody with the idea that by 2021, that person can beat The Fiend. Go with some long-term booking and start building up somebody to reach that level and keep pushing Bray as this unstoppable monster. And then you're really going to have a spectacular WrestleMania main event in 2021 if you keep building up Bray, and meanwhile you build up somebody else and prep them for that top spot. Question number 20 from Noah Foster. What is the one wrestling move you think AEW should do less of overall? At one point I was going to say the super kick, but now I'm going to say the Canadian Destroyer. I think it's a really cool looking move, but now everybody's doing it. When Petey Williams did it, it was unique. Now it's nothing special. And I see it 3-4 times a week now. Another move is the Tope Suicida, the dive over the top that guys do every single match. And it means nothing to me when I see it. Yeah, it's really cool, but everyone's doing it. So it's not that unique anymore. Question number 21 from that Ring Scoops guy, Wayne Needham / Tommy McCardle at Ring Scoops. Question for your Q&A. What are your thoughts on Joey Ryan's rant about the Lana wedding storyline, then days later having Colt Cabana kiss his dick at a show? I found it to be a bit hypocritical from Joey Ryan, and I think he's one of those guys that would say, let fans enjoy what they're going to enjoy. And some people enjoy the Lana and Bobby Lashley stuff. I think he probably said it because he knew people would look at him as a hypocrite. And I think he just did it to troll people and get attention. I really do. Question number 22 from Justin Hayes. Do you think Owen Hart could have ever been a world champion in WWE? Absolutely. I think that he could have gotten a run in 1994, and there was a match where Owen beat Bret and won the WWE title, but WWE never aired the match, so officially the title change was not recognized. I think it would have been a nice run for Owen in '94 to win the title, and then Bret could have won it back. So absolutely you could have done it. I would have rather had seen Owen win the title than Bob Backlund, but that's just me personally. If Owen Hart had lived, I don't think he would have gotten the title, but yeah, I think he could have had a nice little run there, probably in '94. Question number 23 from Steve-O. What is a wrestling angle that everyone hated that you enjoyed or at least tolerated? Probably the Lana and Lashley wedding storyline. I thought that it was very entertaining, but I know a lot of people were critical of it. I just enjoyed it for what it was. I like sports entertainment. I like the soap opera stuff, and I thought it was funny. I thought it was fun to watch. And then on the flip side, question number 24 from Steve-O. What is an angle or moment that everyone seems to love but you disliked? Well, this might be a little bit controversial, but maybe the John Cena US Title Open Challenge. The thing about the John Cena matches around the end of 2015, to me they got so predictable. John Cena always kicks out at 2, and it almost became a running joke, Cena kicking out at 2. And fans in the arena would be getting into the near falls, and I'm like, guys, John Cena doesn't lose clean. He only loses due to outside shenanigans. And maybe the same thing applies to Roman Reigns. Like, Roman Reigns matches get boring to me now because he's always kicking out of everything, and he only loses when there's outside interference. It just becomes very repetitive and stale, yet the live crowds, they always buy into the near falls. So I would say the later John Cena matches and the Roman Reigns matches right now. Question number 25 from Robbie Weiss. What is the best booking ceiling for someone like a Marco Stunt or Orange Cassidy? Can they draw, or would you ever see them becoming a credible champion? I think that they are best off being lower card comedy acts. I don't think there's any real credibility in having Marco Stunt or Orange Cassidy with a championship. I think they're there for comic relief. And Orange Cassidy, I think, is very funny. And I think it's an entertaining gimmick, but it is your opening match comedy act. Same thing with Marco Stunt. Question number 26 from Mark Lee Griffith. Do you think WWE will ever introduce a trio championship? I would like to see it happen personally. I don't think WWE is going to do it because it's not an original idea made by Vince McMahon, the creative genius of WWE. But I think that it should be done. WWE has a lot of three-person factions, so why not? It's something different, at least in the world of WWE. Maybe Triple H will implement it into NXT or the main roster if Triple H is in charge one day. But I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, unfortunately. Question number 27 from Miguel Ortiz. Do you agree with me that TakeOver New Orleans has been the most entertaining TakeOver so far? Being there live was an unforgettable experience. That's a tough one to answer. All the TakeOvers have been great. Like, I don't think that there's been a TakeOver that I thought was lower than an A-. You said you were there live, so I think that that might put it over the top for you a little bit. And for me, I would say the TakeOvers I went to were probably the best ones because I was there in person. Last year's TakeOver, War Games, and I'm talking about 2018, the one in Los Angeles, seeing the War Games in person was really spectacular. So to me, that was probably my most memorable TakeOver experience. But you could really pick any number of them. There are good 6-7 TakeOvers that were really awesome shows. But yeah, that one was one of the best. And the TakeOver New York from 2019 was another one at the top of the list. Question number 28 from Jeremiah. Do you see Adam Cole as a future Raw or SmackDown World Champion? That is a tough question to answer because I don't know how strongly he'll be pushed on the main roster. He's a big fish in a smaller pond right now, but if the timing's right, I could definitely see it as a possibility. But again, it's going to depend on when Adam Cole goes to the main roster, if he does, and who else is on the main roster at the time, and how Vince feels about him. And if Vince is not in charge, if Triple H is in charge, maybe he'll have a better shot. It's tough to say right now. It could really go either way. I think the jury's out on it. Question number 29 from Joseph Conlin. 3 things you want WWE to do differently on the main roster. Number 1, stop doing the shaky camera work. Number 2, no more contract signings. And number 3, stop doing rematches all the time. Seriously, you have a huge roster, change it up. Let's see some different matches. We don't need to keep seeing the same match over and over and over and over again. And if you're going to do rematches, spread it out over 6 months. Don't do it 2 weeks after the first match. 30. Question number 30 from Brandon. What do you think about Anthem buying AXS TV? Also, can we get It's Highly Unlikely one more time for 2020? I will try to fit in a highly unlikely here before I finish this video. I think it's good for Anthem. I think getting away from Pop TV or Destination America or any of those bottom tier channels is a positive for Anthem and Impact Wrestling, just to be able to have some more exposure. So yeah, I think it's a good thing for them, and I don't know if they're going to be able to really grow anymore, but I think that anything is an improvement from what they had before. Question number 31 from Mike A. Mitchell. AEW and NWA love tweeners. Is it wrecking storylines because wrestlers seem to switch roles weekly? I'm not a fan of tweeners in professional wrestling just because I think people need to know who they should be cheering and who they should be booing. The writing in wrestling is usually not strong enough to support tweener-like characters. Characters that are shades of gray, I think, work best when you have really strong writing and the writer is able to appropriately manipulate the audience and get them to react the right way. But unfortunately, the writing is just so uneven that it's hard to really develop a strong character that can be that shade of gray and one moment be a good guy, and you could flip the switch very quickly and make that person a bad guy depending on the story. So yeah, I think for the most part, characters in professional wrestling should stick to a clearly defined good guy or a clearly defined bad guy or bad gal. Question number 32 from Keith. Who do you think Brock Lesnar should defend his WWE title against at the Royal Rumble? I would hope that WWE would just have Brock Lesnar lose the WWE title at the Royal Rumble, get it off him as soon as possible, but we all know that's not going to happen, most likely. Highly unlikely, there you go. I think it'll probably be Brock Lesnar versus somebody like an Alistair Black or a Ricochet, one of the mid-card baby faces on Raw, somebody for Brock to beat. Now, if Brock has to face Cain Velasquez or Tyson Fury, then get it over with at the Royal Rumble and then have Brock lose the title to somebody like Alistair Black at WrestleMania. Question number 33 from Big G. What are you looking forward to towards 2020 in the wrestling community? I'm hopeful that in 2020 the wrestling community will be more positive and be more supportive of one another and not be so negative about everything. So to me, that's what I'm hoping. I'm looking forward to seeing how fans react to NXT and AEW because that's part of the fun of the Wednesday Night War. And I know in some cases it can be negative, but it's also part of the fun having the fans argue back and forth. But you got to be respectful about it and be kind to each other and not call somebody a moron because they have a different opinion. Question number 34 from Colin Andrew. Who do you see jumping from NXT to NXT UK this year? That's an interesting question. I don't think we're really going to see any guys go from NXT to NXT UK because a lot of the people in NXT UK, they live in Europe. They're European stars. As far as NXT goes, I think that those are people that are being groomed to eventually be on the main roster. So I would be really surprised. I don't think we're going to see any NXT UK jumps from NXT. Question number 35 from Jeremiah. With Marty Scurll, Ryback, Killer Kross, and Austin Aries being free agents, where is the best place for each of them to go and why? I think the best place is wherever they can get the best payday. I think Ryback and Austin Aries would be best off in AEW because they had their runs in WWE and didn't really work out for them. Marty Scurll, I think, is best off in AEW with his friends. Killer Kross, however, I think would be best off in WWE. He's a bigger guy. He's the kind of guy that Vince McMahon could get behind. So he's the one of the four that I think would be best off going to WWE. 36. Question number 36 from Justin Hayes. Favorite PWG match? There are so many great ones, but the one I remember the most from my experience of going to a PWG event would have to be Joey Ryan defending the PWG title against the Human Tornado in a steel cage match. I believe it was January 2007. Joey Ryan got so much heat and the fans were littering the ring. It was nuts. But there are so many great PWG matches. El Generico had so many great ones. Him and Human Tornado teamed up and had some great matches. Kevin Steen had a lot of solid matches. So there are so many to pick, but the one that stood out the most to me from my experiences would have to be that cage match. Question number 37 from Keith. Do you think that there is any chance of CM Punk being a surprise entrant in the Royal Rumble match? There's always a chance. I would say it's, again, highly unlikely in all likelihood. I'll believe it when I see it. I'm not going to hold my breath. But yes, there's always a chance. Might be a 0.000001 chance, but there's always a chance. Question number 38 from Hans Ali. If you owned a wrestling promotion, who are your top 5 male and female wrestlers? Interesting question here. For the men, I'd have to go with AJ Styles, Seth Rollins, Daniel Bryan, Kenny Omega. I'd push him stronger than how AEW is pushing him right now. And this might not be the most popular answer, but Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns has the star power. He has the look. The guy's a superstar, whether you like him or not. And as far as female superstars, Becky Lynch, of course, has to be at the top. Charlotte Flair, Sasha Banks, Bayley, the 4 horsewomen. And then from Impact Wrestling, I'd add Tessa Blanchard to the mix. Question number 39 from Jeremiah. If CM Punk does come back for WrestleMania, should he face Seth Rollins or Edge? I think Seth Rollins is the money match. If CM Punk comes back for WrestleMania, I think that Seth Rollins would be a great choice. Another person would be Brock Lesnar. CM Punk versus Brock Lesnar, I think, would be a great main event match for CM Punk to return for. Those would be my top 2 choices right there. Edge, I'd like to see Edge against somebody like Brock Lesnar, or maybe somebody like Daniel Bryan, somebody that Edge hasn't faced before. Question number 40 from Jeremy. Will Triple H be in 100% complete control of WWE sometime by the middle or end of the 2020s? Going back to that earlier question where I had a decade to be right or wrong on this, I will go ahead and say yes, but ultimately it depends on how long Vince is running the show. If Vince is still running the show in another decade, then Triple H will not be in 100% complete control, most likely. But I will go ahead on a limb and say yes. Not that I'm predicting Vince's demise in the next 10 years, but I feel like maybe Vince will get to the point where he's going to retire. I don't know if he ever will, but maybe he will. Maybe he'll shock us all and step down and let Triple H take over. but we'll see. I got 10 years to be right or wrong, so I'll just go ahead and say yes. Nobody will remember this a decade from now. Question number 41 from Friendly Neighborhood Ring Announcer. What is the best debut ever? I would have to say Chris Jericho debuting on Raw, 1999, the Millennial Countdown, Y2J coming out, the reaction he got, that was just such an epic moment. In one night, Chris Jericho became a bigger star than he ever was during his entire run in WCW. I legitimately got goosebumps when he appeared for that first time. Question number 42 from James Combs. Did Randy Orton have you fooled with his kayfabe leg injury? I was wondering what was going on just because WWE doesn't really do worked injuries at house shows. I figured there was always a possibility it was a work. You never really know. WWE could always be working people with injuries. When Orton came out and started being very melodramatic and over the top, that's when I figured it was probably a storyline. But yeah, I was definitely on the fence about it. I wasn't sure if it was legit or not. And I was never able to find footage of the actual moment where the injury allegedly occurred. So I couldn't really take a look at it and see if I thought that it was a legitimate injury or not. Question number 43 from Colin Andrew. Who is your favorite European champion? Well, you cannot go wrong with the British Bulldog, who was the first European champion, winning that match against Owen Hart. Awesome match, by the way. If you haven't seen it, find it online. Find it on the WWE Network. That first match to crown the European champion, Owen and Bulldog had a phenomenal match. But I would have to say D'Lo Brown, because he was a four-time champion and he really represented the European title well, and he had the protection vest, and he was so prideful about being the European champion. So I think D'Lo really helped put that title over, and he would be my top pick. Question number 44 from Cindy. Do you think Ring of Honor will survive despite the recent controversy? That's a tough question to answer. I'm not really sure if Ring of Honor is going to survive regardless of the controversy, because they're basically irrelevant now. Ring of Honor used to be a really big deal. They were almost like a developmental league for WWE. But now you have AEW and WWE has NXT full force. Like, ROH really serves no purpose now. Just like Impact Wrestling has lost its importance in the wrestling industry, Ring of Honor is just another indie promotion. So they may be able to survive like Impact on a shoestring budget. I don't know if the controversy is going to make a difference one way or another. Question number 45 from Mr. Yuck. Should companies bring back managers who run stables akin to the Heenan family, Colonel Parker's stable, Jimmy Hart, and so forth? I would like to see it happen. I miss managers. I know Vince is not high on managers, but I think for a lot of guys in WWE that are not very good promos, they could use a manager, and I think the managers do serve a purpose, and we do have some guys like Paul Heyman. Paul Heyman's basically a manager. He's called the advocate for Brock Lesnar, but he's a manager. But yeah, I would like to see more factions, like one guy managing 5 or 6 people and having a faction. Why not? You might as well. It hasn't been done in a while, so do it. Go for it. Question number 46 from Mark Lee Griffith. Has Chris Jericho surpassed Bret Hart as the best Canadian wrestler of all time? That is a tough question to answer, and I think it's a strong statement to even suggest that Jericho had a better career than Bret Hart. Bret Hart left quite the legacy in wrestling. Chris Jericho has as well, and I think the longevity is what will help put Chris Jericho over the top, and his ability to reinvent his character. Unfortunately for Bret, Bret got injured and his career ended before he could really finish it on a high note. Jericho now into his 50s and he's still going strong. It's unfair to Bret, but yeah, probably when it's all said and done, Jericho will go down as the greatest Canadian wrestler of all time. Question number 47 from Kayfabe Candy Ass. He says, because he always has to be so negative, would I agree with the 2010s being WWE's worst decade, specifically in regards to their television content and not the pay-per-view? I would agree with that. I mean, I feel the early years of WWE television content were not so hot, the 80s, early 90s. But 2010s, when Raw went 3 hours, it really became difficult to enjoy Raw watching it live every single week. And in the late 90s, things really got strong with the Attitude Era. So yeah, I would have to say 2010's weakest overall. But television for WWE really changed drastically from the 80s to the 2010s. They're not exactly the same thing. But yeah, 2010s, especially the last 5 years, it got really difficult to watch it because of too much television and WWE just sticking to their formula with their TV content. And question number 48 from Kayfabe Candy asks, what would be the best single decade when you take the good with the bad? Best single decade, I think, would have to be the 1990s because of the Attitude Era. The TV, in my opinion, was the strongest 97 through 2000. So when you take those years, 97, 98, 99, those 3 years were by far, in my opinion, the best years of WWE television. And that makes up for the weaker first half of the decade. Question number 49 from Deontay Rose. Outside of Triple H, The Rock, Undertaker, and Jericho, how many true headliners are left to go into the WWE Hall of Fame? I think that there are several names that can go in, like a Daniel Bryan, CM Punk, but as far as like your top tier guys go, John Cena, Roman Reigns would be the top two, and Roman Reigns has still got a ways to go before he goes in. I could see John Cena going in at any point now. So those would be my top two that I can think of as far as your top two biggest stars that haven't gone in yet. Question number 50 from Kurt Eternick. Which NWA star would you like to see in WWE or AEW? Well, let me make it simple for you. Eli Drake. I would love to see Eli Drake get to one of the big leagues. I'm not sure about WWE though, because I feel like he might end up with the EC3 treatment. I think he would be a better fit for AEW. And on the women's side, I would like to see Thunder Rosa in AEW or WWE. I think she has a marketable character. We are now halfway through, everybody. Question 51. 50 more questions to go. Cody Busha says, do you see a New Japan and AEW partnership realistically happening? I think that it's inevitable. I think that there will be a partnership between the two sides. I think that it's in New Japan Pro Wrestling's best interest now that they lost their AXS television deal in the United States. They need something. If they're going to continue expanding in the United States, I think it's best for them to have a presence in the United States by working with AEW. And it's good for AEW too, because they can have talents from Japan come on their pay-per-views. I think it's win-win for everyone, and I think it's what's best for business. And question number 52 from Cody. If so, how will it impact AEW's product here in America? I think it will be a positive for AEW because you have these different talents coming in and it presents some new match opportunities. Fans that are following AEW, a lot of them are New Japan fans, and you get those dream matches that fans want to see. Instead of keeping them apart, you're bringing them in and you're creating new opportunities and new matchups. So I definitely think it's a positive. Question number 53 from the Friendly Neighborhood Ring Announcer. Which WWE superstar would have the best run on the indies and revitalize their career? I think Mike Bennett would be at the top of this list. I think that there are a lot of guys in WWE that could benefit from being free agents and doing their own thing. The Revival, of course, as far as tag teams go. How about this one? How about Zack Ryder? I feel like maybe Zack Ryder on the indie scene would be able to think outside the box. I mean, we all forget about the Z True Hollywood story, the Long Island story, the YouTube videos that he was doing. The guy is really creative, and I think with the shackles off, I think Zack Ryder could do some entertaining things. I think he would do really well on his own. Question number 54 from Miguel Ortiz. Do you think the WWE should do more angles and title changes at house shows in order to increase attendance and intrigue? Absolutely. I think that WWE should be doing it every now and then. You want fans to go to house shows and think that anything's possible, that what they're seeing matters. The problem with house shows is that we all know nothing really happens at them. You go just to see the wrestlers live. I mean, that's really the only reason you go. There's no real storyline development. I would like to see more of that and give fans the impression that anything can happen. To me, it's a no-brainer. I know house shows are not a big part of WWE's bottom line, but still, you could do an angle every now and then. You could do something and then on Raw show the footage from the house show. Why not? I don't see the big deal. Question number 55 from Scott Ward. Who is the one wrestler that you think should retire the most? Probably Triple H. I know Triple H likes to come back for WrestleMania and do one more match every now and then, but I don't see the need for it anymore. I think Triple H had a great run, maybe do one more match and then call it a career. I feel like every time he comes back, I'm just like, do we really need this? I mean, is WWE that uncool that they need to bring back Triple H to try and get people interested in watching a pay-per-view event? I mean, you need to focus on your younger talent, as I mentioned earlier, and build them up to be the next Triple H instead of having to rely on Triple H. Question number 56 from the Nerdy QWERTY. If you restarted the NWO this year in WWE, who would you start it off with, and who would you bring back from the OG NWO to help lead the new faction? Well, as far as bringing back people, I'd love to see Hall and Nash as the managers for the new NWO. You could do a storyline where Hall and Nash recruit some new guys. Dolph Ziggler was one that I always thought would have been a good choice for the NWO. I remember him showing up on Talking Smack wearing the NWO shirt. He kind of has that rebellious personality. Maybe a John Morrison type might be good for the NWO. The guys that really have that attitude and that cool factor, with Hall and Nash leading the way, it could be entertaining. I think it would have potential, but hopefully it would be done right and not just some watered down faction. Just guys coming out there wearing an NWO t-shirt. You got to do more than that. Question number 57 from Matic Starian. Who do you see as being the breakout star of 2020 in any Fed? Keith Lee. As far as I'm concerned, Keith Lee is the guy that WWE should be focused on. Put the rocket strap to him. He's got the size, he's got the look, he's got the personality. I think he could potentially be WWE's biggest star. As far as the main roster goes, let it be Alistair Black. I keep saying that over and over again. He won the finisher of the decade on NoDQ.com. He's got that cool factor. Stop messing around with these silly promos. Just let him come out every week and kick some ass. And as far as AEW goes, I've said it before, Luchasaurus. The guy has the look. I feel he's marketable. I feel that you should give him that Goldberg/Ryback type push and let him just destroy people every single week and make him your version of Braun Strowman, but actually go all the way with him and have him win the world title. This one comes from Boston Punk, number 58. Instead of an off-season, do you think WWE superstars would benefit from a stretch of time, maybe post-WrestleMania to SummerSlam, where they only did TVs and pay-per-views and WWE did not run house shows? I think that that would be great for the wrestlers. I don't think WWE would ever go for it. I think they're always going to run house shows because WWE is always going to have bodies. The only thing that I could see WWE doing that's even close to an off season is maybe cycling guys in and out, which I think would be a great idea so it would prevent injuries. Let guys come in, have a 6-month run, and then give them some time off and cycle in these guys in and out, bring in some different people, and then after 6 months, you go back again. That way, guys stay fresh, they don't get stale, and they also can heal their bodies. WWE has a ton of people under contract. They're always going to have people available. So why not do that and keep your talent healthy and keep them fresh as far as television characters go? Number 59 from the DVD Freak. What's the pay-per-view that's most personal to you? I like that question. I have a couple of them. Survivor Series 1990 always stood out to me because it was on my birthday and I fondly remember The Undertaker's debut and the ultimate match of survival. That one was always something that stuck with me over the years. And as far as events that I attended in person, WrestleMania 21, of course, WrestleMania Goes Hollywood, Staples Center. Just that surreal feeling of being in the arena for WrestleMania, the biggest show of the year. I mean, it gave me goosebumps. It was like an out-of-body experience being there in person for that WrestleMania. So those would be my top two. Question number 60 from TJS. If you could only watch one wrestler's matches and promos for the rest of your life, who would it be? Shawn Michaels. I did think about this for a bit, and I came down to Shawn because I look at all the different attributes, and to me, Shawn Michaels was the most well-rounded sports entertainer of all time. Great athlete. His matches were always entertaining and fun to watch and different. Shawn could adapt to different styles. He could do technical wrestling. He could do the high spots. He could do hardcore wrestling. His promos were always really solid. He could be a babyface. He could be a heel. He could go back and forth. He was very versatile. And I think overall, when you look at everything and you put it all together, it has to be Shawn Michaels. Question number 61 from Jeremiah. Should WWE ever split up the Undisputed Era and move them to the main roster or keep them in NXT? I think that depends on the timing. I think the Undisputed Era should go to the main roster as a group, although I could also see Adam Cole breaking off on his own. And WWE could always do that storyline where Adam Cole gets kicked out of the group and Undisputed Era does their own thing. You could do it either way, but I think what's most important is the timing. Doing it at the right time and not rushing with the storyline just for the shock value. Waiting till there's a good reason to do it, whether it's break up the group or have them go to the main roster. And as far as them going to the main roster, I think it just depends on when there's a good spot for them where they're going to be used in a prominent position. Question number 62 from Danny Boy. Why is NXT TakeOver better than the main roster pay-per-views? Number one, shorter show, 2.5 hours, perfect time as far as I'm concerned for a wrestling show. 5 matches, you just stick to a formula here. In this case, it works. You know, sometimes the formula gets old, but this seems to be like the Midas touch for WWE. 5 matches, you have your main event, your men's match, your women's championship match, tag team title match, all the main titles on the line, and then you have a grudge match. It's just very nicely put together, and every match is given a good amount of time, and every match they're able to go out there and have the best match possible. That's why the takeovers are always a home run, because everything just works. The matches are really solid, and it goes by very quickly, and it's just a nice, fun wrestling show. Number 63 from Stephen Osborne. In the wake of Finn Balor, who's the next main roster star to fully switch to NXT? Interesting question. I think that it might depend on who is feeling banged up and might want to work a lighter schedule. I could see somebody like Kevin Owens down the line going back to NXT. I could see Sami Zayn possibly doing it. I'm looking at some of the guys that were big in NXT 4 or 5 years ago. Maybe Shinsuke Nakamura could go back at some point. I mean, one of those three I think would be good candidates to go back. And maybe guys that were never in NXT, like Mike Bennett / Mike Kanellis, if he doesn't get released and go back to the Indies at some point, have him go to NXT and give his career a reboost. Question number 64 from Keith. If Roman Reigns goes on to win the Royal Rumble, do you think he should turn heel against Bray Wyatt at WrestleMania 36? I think it's too little too late for a Roman Reigns heel turn. Like with John Cena around 2012, I felt like there was a point where if you're going to do it, do it. If not, then you missed the opportunity. And I think the opportunity was missed with Roman Reigns. Now, he had that cancer battle, and fans are cheering him for the most part. He occasionally gets booed, but not as much as he did before. As long as he doesn't get shoved down people's throats, just let him do what he's doing. I would like to see him versus Bray Wyatt, but I think Bray Wyatt should beat him. We'll see what happens with that. Question number 65 from Colin Andrew. Do you see the Dusty Classic being renamed in the next year or two? I don't. I think that the Dusty Classic is very fitting. Dusty was a big part of NXT and helping those younger talents, and it's a nice tribute to him. Cody seems to be cool with it. I don't see any reason to change the name of the tournament. I think it's fine. I think everybody is happy with it being the Dusty Classic, excuse me. Question number 66 from DG, at Wrestling Talk DG. Where would the wrestling business be without social media? And he says, shout out to everyone who supports NoDQ.com. And thank you for that. That's an interesting question. I think we might be off better without social media. Again, it depends on who you ask and what perspective you're looking at it from. Like I said earlier, social media makes it where fans can interact with the wrestlers more, but some see it as we're seeing too much behind the curtain and wrestlers are breaking kayfabe too much, and there's just too much being put out there on social media instead of saving it for television and having a little bit more mystique to the product. So it definitely has its pros and cons. The wrestling business did just fine without it, though, I will say that. Question number 67 from Rude Ben. If Rey Mysterio's son Dominic wrestles, should he wear the mask and take the Mysterio name, or would having a different persona be better? On one hand, I think it might be cool if eventually Dominic got Rey Mysterio's mask, if Rey passed it down to him and Dominic inherited the mask. But at the same time, I think Dominic should have his own identity and not rely on his father's name. You know, he could be Dominic Mysterio, but maybe give him a different mask, something that's his own identity and makes him unique. I think that might be a good idea, or just have him not wear a mask. But the masks, they do sell a lot, and WWE is all about the money, so I could see him wearing a mask at some point. Question number 68 from Mike A. Mitchell. Is there such a thing as too much televised wrestling? And he brings up WWE having 3 shows, AEW with 2 shows, ROH, TNA, NWA, MLW, and so on and so on. Yeah, I mean, it's hard for somebody like me who covers wrestling, but for the fans, the positive is that you don't have to watch everything. I think it's bad that the wrestling product is being oversaturated, but you do have choices, and you can pick and choose what you want to watch. There's plenty of content out there. There's a variety of things. If you like WWE and sports entertainment, you do have Raw and SmackDown. If you like shows that are more wrestling heavy, you have AEW. If you like a throwback to the 1980s, you have the NWA. There's something for everybody. If you like intergender wrestling, you have Impact Wrestling with Sami Callihan and Tessa Blanchard feuding. Question number 69 from Mr. Yuck. Could Lars Sullivan's career be salvaged if he were to be repackaged into a Big Valboski type persona using his supposed sex tape as an advantage? I don't think that would work. Lars Sullivan is supposed to be a killer. If you turn him into a comedy act, then that defeats the purpose of what he's all about. He is a monster, a freak. He basically becomes the Great Khali circa 2010 when you do that. Or he becomes Viscera, the love machine. Not going to have a very long shelf life. Question number 70 from Dylan. How did ECW get away with all the talent having licensed songs? Sandman with Metallica, Tommy Dreamer with Alice in Chains, and so on. If ECW can do it, why not WWE or AEW? I think there were several reasons. First of all, ECW was a glorified independent wrestling promotion. They were under the radar, and WWE has used songs. It's less expensive to use a song for a live event than it is to have the song on a DVD or, back in the day, a VHS tape. You notice that WWE would edit out the songs when it's rebroadcasted, but when it's live, WWE and other promotions will just use the copyrighted music. So I think that's why ECW got away with it, because it was just the live show where you heard it. And also, because they're so far under the radar, I don't think any companies that publish music were really targeting ECW. And I think ECW may have had some sort of deal where they were able to use the music for live events. This question comes from Jeremy, 71. If the NWO had disbanded in July 98 after Hollywood Hogan lost the WCW title and Goldberg had not faded away, how would you have booked Goldberg's title reign? He thinks that Scott Steiner should have ended the streak. Scott Steiner would have been a really good choice. Scott Steiner was red hot as a heel. Whoever it was, whether it was Scott Steiner or somebody else, what about Raven? Raven might have been a good choice if WCW was playing their cards right, or a Chris Benoit. You know, it's easy to say in hindsight, but what WCW should have done, in my opinion, was they should have started building up the next guy to take out Goldberg and set somebody up to eventually beat Goldberg, because then that guy would have been a made star by beating the guy that ended the streak. Kevin Nash did not need that win at all. He was already a superstar. You could have made somebody by having him beat Goldberg and end the streak. So whether it was Scott Steiner, who you could argue was also already made, ideally you would have built up a new star. Like maybe they shouldn't have passed on Batista. If they had signed Batista, they could have built him up as the guy, or any number of people. Mike Awesome, instead of making him the fat chick Thriller, they could have built him as a monster, and he could have eventually beat Goldberg. Question number 72 from Kennard. What are your hopes for Alistair Black? I feel like he should be, if not already, the main star. What big-time feud do you think Alistair could be part of to get over that hump? I have mentioned this earlier during this Q&A. I think Alistair Black should beat Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania. If I was calling the shots, that's what I would do. Again, you can make the guy by having him beat the man. To be the man, you got to beat the man, right? You want to make Alistair Black, have him beat Brock Lesnar decisively. Question number 73 from Mike. What is the best Iron Man match in WWE history not at WrestleMania 12? I really enjoyed the Triple H and Rock Iron Man match from Judgment Day 2000, where The Undertaker came out at the end. That one was a lot of fun. And the other one that stands out to me, Brock Lesnar versus Kurt Angle from 2003. That was a great Iron Man match as well, in my opinion. Question number 74 from Cindy. What is the best women's match of all time from any company? One of my favorites is the NXT TakeOver Brooklyn match, Sasha versus Bayley. To me, that match helped with the women's evolution perhaps more than any other match from that period, because the two of them went out there, tore the house down, and that was right when the women's revolution was starting to kick into high gear. So I think that match was very important. And also, the first Women's Royal Rumble, of all the firsts, that one to me really delivered, and that was a big moment for Asuka to win that Royal Rumble. Gotta be my two choices right there. Question number 75 from Never Give Up. And he says, what non-violent pro wrestling segment did you feel uncomfortable watching? A lot of segments over the years. I mean, there are so many that I just have to block them from my memory. Otherwise, I will be traumatized at night and I will be unable to sleep. Now, the one that really stands out to me was the Claire Lynch angle from TNA. That one was so bad, and Aces and Eights, a lot of those segments were very cringy. Anything with Brooke Hogan. I could just name a whole bunch of Impact Wrestling segments from that period that just drove me absolutely crazy. But yeah, I think that Claire Lynch one, just that visual of her close-up, like, ugh. How that did not win the worst storyline of the decade on NoDQ.com, I have no idea. This one comes from Michael Bunge. Question number 76. What is the most underrated WrestleMania match? I like that question. For me personally, it has to be Roddy Piper versus Bret the Hitman Hart Intercontinental Championship at WrestleMania 8 Hoosier Dome. To me, that match was really a big moment for Bret Hart to beat an all-time legend clean. And you have to keep in mind, Roddy Piper almost never lost, especially clean. So for Piper to put over Bret clean in the middle, you could not ask for a better seal of approval. Piper making Bret look like $1 million, and Bret could do that on his own, but Piper passing the torch, so to speak, to Bret Hart. Such a big moment for Bret's career. So that one really stands out to me, but it's one that a lot of people really don't talk about. So you got to go back and watch it if you haven't seen it. Question number 77 from Kenny. What is my favorite last man standing match ever? No Mercy 2007, Triple H versus Randy Orton. WWE was kind of in a pickle because John Cena had gotten injured and WWE had to come up with this last-minute storyline. So they had Triple H versus Randy Orton. Triple H would win the title at the beginning of the show only to lose it back to Randy Orton at the very end. So I thought that was a really solid match and a storyline from start to finish. They had to take a bad situation and make the most out of it. Question number 78 from Peter S. Man. Do you think we will ever see the likes of an Undisputed Era in the Hall of Fame? Absolutely, but that's going to be way down the line. We're talking a good 20, 30 years from now. I think we will most certainly see the Undisputed Era in the Hall of Fame. I mean, one of the top factions of the decade, and they could be this next decade as well. Who knows how long they'll be around, but they've made quite the impact in WWE, and I think that it's pretty much a sure thing. And question number 79 from Jeremy. Do you see Sable going into the WWE Hall of Fame? Yes, absolutely, and I'm surprised she's not in the Hall of Fame already, considering her accomplishments, and she's married to Brock Lesnar, but that has nothing to do with it. She's on good terms with WWE. I'm really shocked that she's not in it already. But yeah, I would definitely have Sable in. And Caitlin, with question number 80, says, when will the Bella Twins go into the WWE Hall of Fame? I could see it happening at any time. I feel like the Bellas have pretty much winded down their WWE careers. I could see it happening within the next 5 years. Beth Phoenix went in relatively young. I could see the same thing happening with the Bellas. But yeah, I think that they will go in as well. And regarding all these Hall of Fame questions, it's called the Coco Beware answer. If Coco can go in the Hall of Fame, anybody can go in the Hall of Fame. Question number 81 from Zane Johnson, the Schlock. Why do you think the WWE main roster does not speed up the pace of their matches to the likes of NXT? Higher paced action engages the crowd and keeps them on their toes, whereas main roster crowds are generally dead during the matches. I think it's the old philosophy that you have to have a lower card, a mid card, and your upper card, and you don't want your lower and mid card guys outshining your top guys. That's just the way it is. WWE wants to push certain people. With NXT, I think the idea is that if you're on the card, go out there and try to put on a main event performance. That's their philosophy. That's the indie style. PWG, Ring of Honor, they really got that as a thing in the indie scene where every match they would try to have a WrestleMania caliber match. And that's what Triple H is trying to do with NXT. NXT is, appealing to the indie fan base where they want to see every match be a WrestleMania caliber match with kickouts and flips over the top and how many tope suicidas can you do in one match. But on the main roster, Vince wants to push certain guys, and he doesn't want the guy in the second match looking better than Roman Reigns. Just saying. Justin Hayes with question number 82. Overall, who was the better faction, the NWO or DX? Without the NWO, there would have not been a DX. So I have to go with the NWO. As far as impact on the business, NWO. As far as long-term entertainment value, maybe DX, because the NWO did get stale. They had too many people in the group after a while, but when they were hot, there was nothing hotter. So I got to give the slight edge to the New World Order. Question number 83 from Ernesto. Who do you feel was the biggest bust or most underutilized talent to come from NXT? Well, there were a few. Adam Rose comes to mind. Pretty big bust on the main roster. No Way Jose. And then guys that you feel should have been bigger deals than they were. Guys like Eric Young and EC3. Let's not forget, both of them were Impact World Champions. And then they come to WWE and they're pretty much reduced to 24/7 title segments. So really, I would say that Eric Young, EY, and EC3 were bigger busts because there were probably higher expectations for them to succeed. Question number 84 from Lee Patton. Is AEW going to be around in 5 years, and what will it look like? I think so. I mean, every time we predict the demise of a wrestling promotion like TNA, the company manages to stick around. So I'm just going to say, for the record, I could be wrong, but 5 years from now, will you guys really remember this? I think AEW will still be around. What will they look like? They could be completely different. The wrestling business could change a lot in 5 years, so that is really hard to say without a crystal ball. Question number 85 from Jeremy. Instead of Rikishi being the man that ran down Stone Cold, who do you think should have been the person? To me, I should have said that it would have been like a guy like Chris Benoit, one of the Radicals. The problem with that is Chris Benoit was in WCW at the time. Looking at who was on the roster at the time when Austin got hit with the car and then when Austin came back, not a lot of guys would have made much sense. I think that it should have been Triple H all along. Yes, Triple H, that was the predictable route, but you know, WWE tried to do a swerve, and what they ended up doing is just picking a name out of a hat with Rikishi, and nobody really bought it, and it ruined Rikishi's momentum. So I would have just gone the safe route and picked Triple H. Question number 86 from Chris. Do you ever see Y2J Chris Jericho returning to WWE before he retires? Yes, absolutely. I think we will see Chris Jericho back. I think he's going to end up in the Hall of Fame one of these days. I think that that's inevitable. Now, when will that be? Will it be in 5 years, 10 years? That remains to be seen. But yes, I would be shocked if Chris Jericho does not return to WWE at some point. Question number 87 from Bradley. Do you miss the Attitude Era? I do at times, but that was an era that was a product of its time. And in 2020, a lot of that stuff would not fly now. And as much as I would like to see it come back, I want to see something new. You got to do a new era. You got to be creative and come up with something we haven't seen before. Attitude Era coming back would just be nostalgia. You got to do something fresh that's innovative and takes wrestling to a new place that we haven't been to before. Question 88 from Justin Hayes. Who is one person who should have won the Royal Rumble but never did? Well, I have three choices. CM Punk, Daniel Bryan, and both of those guys, they were pretty big stars. It would have been cool to see them win. But I think the third guy I have here is maybe my top choice, and that's Kane. Because Kane was so dominant in the Royal Rumble. He eliminated all those people in 2001. In other years, he was dominant, but he never won it. It would have been cool to see Kane win just one Royal Rumble match. So he would be my choice, number one. Question 89 from Steve-O. Who could you see being the first AEW talent to jump ship over to WWE? Interesting question there. I'm going to throw out a name. I have no idea because AEW is trying to lock people into long-term contracts. But how about Britt Baker? Because she is with Adam Cole in real life, and you would think that she would want to work for the same company as her boyfriend. I could see her go into WWE. I could see somebody like MJF go into WWE. Great talker. I think he would fit well in WWE. Hopefully they would not drop the ball with him. So those would be my top two. Question number 90 from Mike. Should WWE stop giving pay-per-view level matches on Raw and SmackDown to make pay-per-view seem a little more special? It doesn't really matter now. We're in a different era. Back in the day before the WWE Network, it was really important from a business perspective to do that because so much of WWE's revenue came from pay-per-views. But now with the network, it doesn't matter. And the television rights deals are so lucrative for WWE now. You want people watching the TV shows. So you want to have a balance. The most important thing, I think, is to have the titles defended at every pay-per-view and make sure every pay-per-view card is as strong as possible. Don't throw it together. Just give it some love and make sure that all the titles are on the line and you're doing big matches from start to finish, matches that have 4 or 5 weeks of build-up. But every now and then you could throw a big match on Raw or SmackDown, you know? I like it. I think you should do it every once in a while to keep Raw and SmackDown a little bit unpredictable. Like with the house shows, you can do a title change every now and then so people know if you miss Raw or SmackDown, you might miss something important. All right, we're down to our last 10. Sun Goshiku with number 91. What did you think about the final cut of the Paige and AJ Lee match in the movie Fighting With My Family compared to seeing the scene and match filmed live? So I was there in Los Angeles when WWE or The Rock's production company filmed that match for the movie. It was quite interesting to see how much work had to be put into post-production. Watching it live, you know, it was very slow-paced and most of the fans had left the arena. It was quiet, but when you watch the movie, it moves very quickly. You hear lots of cheering. You see fans in the arena. So the editing and the post-production, they did a great job with it, and they made it look really spectacular. When watching it live, it was kind of a dud, but they made it work, and it was a very entertaining movie. If you haven't seen it, I recommend checking it out. Question number 92 from Chisaki. Why is Brock Lesnar still around? He brings nothing to the table and is only there for the money and nothing more. He's a star. He's a special attraction. I am sick of Brock Lesnar as the heel monster who comes out and beats up somebody every 3 or 4 months. Paul Heyman comes out, cuts the same promo. I don't have a problem with Brock being around, but I think it's time to break him away from Paul Heyman or do something different with him. Change it up. How many times are we going to hear, my name is Paul Heyman, blah, 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 and Brock's going to stand around? Let's do something different. If Brock's going to be around, let's do something different. Question number 93 from Justin Hayes. Do you think that Kenny Omega was essentially watered down and lost that must-see awe he had because of his... Question number 93 from Justin Hayes. Do you think that Kenny Omega was essentially watered down and lost that must-see awe he had because of his involvement with AEW? I don't think it was him being involved with AEW by itself. I think it's how AEW has booked him. AEW has kind of been in a weird position because Kenny Omega, Cody, the Bucks, they're all the founders of the company, but they don't want to book themselves as main eventers because they don't want fans thinking, well, these guys are just putting themselves in the main events. It was bad for business back in the day when promoters would do that, when they would book themselves as the champion, or when Jeff Jarrett in TNA would book himself as the world champion, and AEW is trying to avoid that. The problem is that Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, Cody, they're the ones that brought AEW to the dance. They're the stars. They're the draws. So when Kenny Omega is not being booked in the main event position, you're watering him down. Absolutely. That's the problem here. And again, it's a really awkward situation for AEW right now because they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. Question number 94 from Cindy. Which NXT stable has been more dominating for the NXT brand, Undisputed Era or Imperium? Undisputed Era, because NXT is the main brand of NXT. NXT UK is a secondary brand, and Imperium doesn't have that exposure that Undisputed Era has, and Undisputed Era coming out on Raw and SmackDown and dominating. Walter getting beat at Survivor Series, got to be Undisputed Era. Question number 95 from Jeremy. Instead of Steve Austin turning on Team WWE at Invasion in 2001, who should have turned heel instead? And he thinks it should have been Chris Jericho or Kurt Angle. I think it should have been Jericho. I know WWE ended up doing the Jericho heel turn eventually as the Invasion was coming to an end, but Jericho was part of WCW, so it would have made sense. And granted, so was Steve Austin, but we all know the Steve Austin story about how he got fired. And just Austin going back to a heel was a bad idea. Jericho, I think, would have been a better fit, or even Chris Benoit, but unfortunately, Benoit got injured at the time. I know at the time they were doing a tease that one of them was going to go back to WCW. Should have been Jericho, in my opinion. Question number 96 comes from Ken. What was the one wrestling rumor that did not come true that you wish did? I think Shawn Michaels coming back to face AJ Styles at the Royal Rumble in San Antonio, Texas. To me, that would have been epic. That would have been way better than Shawn coming back in Saudi Arabia. Let's be real here. That would have been the perfect opportunity. And would have been such a cool moment in the Alamo Dome to see that match. I'm pretty sad about that. And, you know, the talk about Austin and Goldberg having a match and that never happened. CM Punk and Steve Austin. There were quite a few matches that were rumored and just didn't happen. But that Shawn Michaels rumor was quite big. And you even had that pay-per-view poster. How about Sting and The Undertaker in 2011? That pay-per-view poster that was out there. Question number 97 from Mike. Do you think WWE rushes people into the Hall of Fame? There are a lot of others from the 80s that should be there. I think it just comes down to politics and timing and WWE putting in people when they want to and when they think they'll get the most publicity for it. And part of the problem too is I think WWE inducts too many people every year. I think it should be 5 tops. Maybe 1 tag team, 1 male singles, 1 female singles, and then 1 non-wrestling personality, maybe a manager or a referee. And keep it short. Keep the list short every year so that way you don't run out of people. And then you can also let them cut longer speeches. Instead of having them be limited with how long they can talk, they're given more time to have the stage one final time and be able to bask in the moment. Question number 98 from Calvin Bowman. Do you think that Alistair Black will win the Royal Rumble and face Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania for the WWE Championship? No. And I hate to say it because of what I said earlier, but I'm not getting my hopes up that that's going to happen. Do I want to see that happen? Absolutely. I would love it. I think it should happen. But realistically, don't think it's going to be going down. Question number 99 from Justin Hayes. Which finisher today should remain protected? Black Mass, going back to Alistair Black again. Finisher of the decade on NoDQ.com. It would be nice to see that finisher continue to beat people and not have wrestlers kick out from it. That would be pretty cool. And now, the final question of this Q&A. Question 100. And I do not have the person's name on here, so I apologize. Of the current superstars, what is the biggest possible WrestleMania main event match that could happen? I hate to say it, not a popular answer, but Roman Reigns versus Bray Wyatt, with the other exception being CM Punk. If CM Punk was to come back, CM Punk versus Brock Lesnar. But you said current superstars. So I'm going to go with Roman Reigns and The Fiend. And again, people might not like that, but Roman Reigns is the face of the company, and Bray Wyatt is arguably the hottest act in the company right now. So you got to put the two together, I think, for WrestleMania. That would be the match I would go with. Again, I would not have Roman beat Bray Wyatt. Roman would put over Bray, but I would at least do the match. So that's it, everybody, for the 100 questions Q&A video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. This might be the last one, who knows, but if you guys want to see more Q&A videos, leave a comment and let me know. If you did enjoy the video, again, please share it, spread the word, tell a friend, subscribe, turn on the notification bell for updates, and stay tuned to NoDQ.com for the very latest. Have a great day, everyone. Take care.